Trying out a new format here. Hope it works okay. I'm gonna record in advance and then post bits at a time, especially now that I know it takes forever for the videos to upload. So here we go. My name is Mara. I do scribally things. There's a lot on that website that's linked up above. So for period materials, there are many primary sources for all of this info, but since this is kind of just an introductory primer type deal, most of the info you're gonna find here is mostly from Scribes and Sources, this one, and Chinini, which I can't show you because it's in a box somewhere. So, but it's Libre d'Art, the Craftsman's Handbook. Pretty easy to find it. The materials I'm discussing are sort of a broad spectrum look at period materials, so different time periods and locations may vary in what they use. So this kind of a primer to let you know what's out there. Not a definitive source on like all things for period Scribal. Also, I recognize a lot of period stuff uses animal products. So if you don't like using animal products, there is a link under the how-tos and handouts on my site that discusses alternatives for vegan Scribal. So go ahead and pull up the handout and I'll start posting the other videos. Okay, so apparently you can't switch camera view partway through, so we're just going to do like this for a minute. Alright, so parchment. This was the predominant work surface at the time. Parchment is hide that's been scraped and stretched until it's super thin. It's a whole long process. I've done it before, and teaching how to make it is its own class entirely. The best parchment is super smooth and was worked on with a slanted desk, sometimes as high as 80 degrees, and you can kind of see it here. You can see how high up that desk is, and you can also see it really well here. This is clearly much later period. This was only made possible by all the other materials used and is difficult to translate when you're working with paper and metal nibs. So here are a couple pieces of parchment. This is a cutoff for like a test piece from one of my favorite vendors. It's medievally prepared, has a nice smooth surface. I don't know if it can't really translate to film really well, but you can at least see that's lamp black ink that's on there. And normally I have a hard time writing with lamp black. Well, except for those right there. That's oh god. But so most of his stuff is scroll grade, more so than manuscript grade, which means you only work on one side, but to be honest, that works just fine for me. His details are on the Working on Parchment handout that's on the website. This is another kind that I see online a lot. It tends to be marketed as more affordable. It's okay. It takes a feather quill pen just fine. Not sure about steel or anything else. I have found that since it's bumpier, it isn't the best for flat gilding though, since it transfers that texture. But raised gilding worked just fine on it. The little 5x7 Bar and Ivy illuminated D on in my gallery is on this paper. The Mod scroll that's labeled Francois Maud and Petrus's Laurel and Thorkatha and Wolfston's counties are on this parchment right here. So it's not terrible, it's just not my preference. The most common modern alternative for this is Pergamenata, and you can see it has like sort of this see-through quality to it. I think you'll be able to see these letters, yeah. So it has a bit of a see-through quality to it. It mimics the smooth burnished surface that parchment has, but it's made out of vegetable fibers instead. I get my Perg from John Neal Books. I get the pre-cut pack of that has like 10 11x14s and 2 11x13.5s. Heavy-duty Perg. You can use natural or white, whichever one. It costs about $18 plus shipping and handling, so it's a little more than like $1.50 a sheet. Compared to parchment, that's like let's see. Well, the best price, like there's a lot of variability. So this one right here, the one that I like, which is honestly the best bang for your buck, 11x13 is $30 plus shipping and handling for one sheet. So like that's a great price, but it's also why I don't do a ton of parchment scrolls unless they're commissioned. For more information on how to work on parchment, click the link that's up there in the description of this post. Okay, so Pounce was a powder that treated the parchment by absorbing oils. the thing about working on parchment permanganate is that any oils that touch it, skin oils, oils from a wool cloak, whatever, like to sit on that surface and make it difficult for your ink or paint to go down. Or even if it goes on the page, it can weaken the bonding to the page and make it pop off later. I keep meaning to do a walkthrough for pounce like I did for glair, but I keep forgetting. So there are a lot of different kinds of pounces. You can buy a lot of kinds. You can make a lot of kinds. Look in your different primary sources. See what works best for you. There's some documentation for chalk, but a lot of the recipes I find are bone. The recipe I like to make is bone pounce out of chinini, specifically the recipe using fowl wings. There are recipes for fish bones too, but I just happen to have access to chicken bones more often than fish. So these bones are aged, and I usually leave them outside on the porch for like 1 to 3 months. Then I throw them in a fire until they're white. I've tried to do this in an oven. It didn't really work. What also didn't work was using hot wings, because apparently hot sauce can survive a nuclear explosion. So make sure you use wings, bone wings from like a baked chicken, or from boiled chicken wings. That's what mine were from. The best way I've found is over wood, since charcoal made it do weird things. And there's an image of this in your handout. So after I let them burn past the bone black stage, which is like that stage right there, and then I let them get past the bone gray stage, which is this end and right there, they get to this bone white stage. So you let them cool, like in where they are, in the wood, in the ash, whatever, so that you can pick them out with your hands, since using tweezers or whatever I found makes them break rather easily since they're so fragile at the bone white stage. Make sure you only have the bones and not the ash from the wood. You may need to lightly dust them off with a very soft brush or something like that if it's a concern. And then you powder them. I did mine with a little pestle and mortar. The bone white can also be used for a pigment, but that's a lesson for another time. To use the bone white as pounce, you put it in like a little muslin or like cheesecloth, something with a relatively thin weave, and then you just like dab it all over your parchment page. So since you're not going to really be able to see it here, I'm going to do it on the table. So you see how it's dusting it, right? That is the powdered bone white coming out right now. So then you just let it sit for a while, kind of absorb all of the oils. Then once you're ready, you can dust it off with like the clean cloth on that. You can dust it off of your page like that. You can use the tuft of a feather. The little feather tuft is used for a lot of stuff. Sometimes just whatever spare cloth you had. One of the things that was in one of the books I was reading was saying to use a little rabbit's foot to get it off, and I have actually found the rabbit's foot to be the most effective, but I know that squicks a lot of people out, the idea of a rabbit foot. So you can see how much that moved it. Just any way to get it off, the pounce off. This is a modern lead tin stylus. Trying to do this with one hand, sorry. See, it writes things. It's the pencil that they used. It didn't look quite like this exactly, because this is since this is a modern one, there's a fair amount of documentation for charcoal, but this seems to be limited to rough sketches or earlier pieces, since it could affect the pH of the parchment and can actually lead to color shifts in ink and paints. It could also leave permanent smudges. So the lead tin stylus became more common later on, but it had a 2-to-1 lead to tin ratio. Unlike other metal point styli, it didn't require a coarse surface on it. So a lot of them, like, you actually leave the pounce or have like a gesso laid down for like a silver point. Whereas this one, it doesn't actually need it. However, the Pounce can help with this modern lead tin stylus, because those tend to have a much higher tin ratio. Like, it's like 1 to 5 lead to tin instead of the 2 to 1. So there are a lot of things that can act as an eraser. So, by far my favorite, both because of functionality and because I just think it's nifty, is bread. I think it was Chinini who suggested it. Like, basically he's saying, well, if you have some bread, or like breadcrumbs from lunch, and you make a mistake with your stylus that you really need to get rid of, like there's no painting over it or dealing with it later, use your bread to smudge the mistake away. And there's a picture of that in your handout as well. I've tried it, it actually works. But you can't have like butter on your bread or have any greasy bread. I use basic rye bread, and then I just repounce the area once I'm done just to get anything off of it. For lighter lines though, I've actually found that a lot of times the quill, let's see if it'll do it for this one, because these were not light lines. I was trying to have them seen. Yeah. You can kind of see how it's starting to go away. So lighter lines, the little tuft on the quill can actually work as an eraser as well. Okay, so a very common black ink was iron gall ink, also called, or iron oak gall ink, also called oak gall ink, also called iron gall ink, such as Palatino's recipe, which, like most iron oak gall inks, use tannic acid extracted from oak galls, copperas, which is iron 2 sulfate, gum arabic, and even pomegranate peel for this nice sheen. So as you can see, it kind of goes on kind of thin, but I promise it, like, that's what these two letters, that E and O, looked like, was super thin, and then they oxidized that, and it eventually gets much darker. There are a few that don't oxidize properly, but they're kind of rare in my experience. Another common black ink was lamp black. This usually used egg yolk as a binder, but there were many recipes used in Period. One of the benefits of the egg yolk lamp black is that you can make glair with the egg white and then make lamp black with the egg yolk. Or you can make pudding instead with the egg yolk, whichever. Of the lamp black inks, simply lamp black plus gum arabic, using, less gum arabic than in paint, and then water is still my favorite. And if you're having problem getting your lamp black or your carbon to go into suspension, just add like a small drop of like rubbing alcohol or wine or something like that to help it go into suspension. But even still, oak gall is my go-to black ink. Other ink colors varied widely. A famous red ink is Brazil wood ink, which varied from blood red to maroon to a deep purple depending on acidity and temperature while it's being made. And it was also used in Codex Aureus to dye entire pages. And so we have a Brazil wood ink here that's very, very old, was boiled very, very high temperature, and was used with stout as a base. And you see it has a little bit of that purple sheen, but it's mostly almost brown, which is gorgeous because I have some like Elizabethan manuscripts that use like this brown ink. So honestly, I use it for those a lot. And then another one, I think this is a white wine base, and it wasn't boiled at as high of a temperature, and has this beautiful red color that just is not being done justice by this camera. But it's a gorgeous red color. Other popular red inks were lead red, which is that one is right there. It's just dried up, but it used to be lead red. So that's lead red, and you just add a little bit of water. It already has the gum arabic in it. You could even make it out vermilion. I find that lead red goes into suspension a little bit better than the vermilion does. But that's just my personal experience. And again, you make it like paint, lower ratio of the gum arabic, not as thick. Same logic applies to blue ink. This is a lapis ink, or again, is a dehydrated lapis ink. Other colors such as green, likely sap green, which is already thinner, or even terra vert with ink ratios for gum arabic, and like, honestly, ink is one of the things that a lot of people are afraid to make because they hear like the process for Palatinos or the Brazil wood, and they assume that, oh my god, I can never have custom ink. But honestly, like, if you want a nice pretty green ink to be your Roman capitals on like this like middle period scroll that you're doing, then, and you want it to match that paint, then do it. Make it. Just water it down a little bit and play with the ratio of the binder. There's a whole walkthrough linked about how to make glair. It's linked above. It's often misspelled G-L-A-R-E, by the way, but it's G-L-A-I-R. It's made from whipped egg whites, which are allowed to settle, and this separates the sticky part from the protein matrix. The settled glair is then drained or poured off. I tend to keep my plate it sits on at an angle and pipette the glair off as it comes off. You keep it in a sealed container in the fridge if you don't use it quickly. This can be used as a binder in paints, usually earlier period, as with, you know, gum arabic. I just had it. Powder gum arabic right here. Saw the rise of Romanesque illumination and because of the ability of the gum arabic to rehydrate. You also start seeing some of like the shading styles where you can fuzz it and stuff like that, and really start mixing like on the page. Like glair can rehydrate, but it has a very limited capacity to do it. So it's used for flat gilding and paints, and really anytime you need something sticky. A few other binders, again, usually used for flat gilding, are garlic juice, boiled stout, and fish glue and hide glue. Garlic juice is made by squeezing finely minced, pureed, if you can, garlic through a cheesecloth. This way you get the tacky nature of the garlic without the pulp. That was used mostly for flat gilding, and it's honestly my favorite gilding mordant. So here's a card I did forever ago. Boiled stout, fish glue, both of which I had to water down. There's a raised gesso, garlic. So I got the best result off of garlic. I did okay with boiled stout and fish glue. I didn't have very good luck with glair, and that was with glair and garlic juice mix, which I also had very limited luck with. So if you try to lay down the garlic juice by like just kind of pureeing it, you'll get some texturing to it, and that's why you want it to go on flat, which is why you want to make sure to strain out that. Boiled stout was literally just stout that you boil down to a gooier consistency. I've heard that the hippie organic stouts are better because they lack a lot of the preservatives you see in American beers. This was used mostly for flat gilding. I know that this is my Laurel's favorite flat mordant. I'm okay with it, and I put it above straight glair, but probably about on par with fish glue for me. So here is some boiled stout. I don't know if you can see it. Let's see if it's just kind of gooey stout. See if I can get some of it to start pouring out. So, see, it's not super liquidy, but it's also not super tacky either. It's just super tacky either. Alright. Fish glue, again, mostly for flat gilding, can be used instead of hide glue when making gesso. It's made like hide glue, but uses fish skin and other bits instead of animal hide. Hide glue can be used as a flat gilding mordant, but because of its sometimes more rigid nature than fish glue, a lot of folks prefer to use it for making gesso for raised gilding rather than for flat gilding. Hide glue was also allowed to dry into these little strips or little pieces. Though I definitely suggest smaller strips than these, because these take a while to rehydrate, and then you can just rehydrate them and use them as you need them. Gesso. Okay, so this was used for raised gilding. Now we're not talking about the modern use of the word gesso, which is like a white substance that goes on top of canvas. This is a base painted on the page only where the raised gilding is going to go. The difference between flat gilding and raised gilding is that with flat, you just lay that sheer mordant on the page. I actually have some that I'll be using in the next part of the lecture. So you see just this very sheer layer of my mordant on the page, versus this actual surface right here with the gesso. So when you lay the sheer mordant on the page and lay the gold on that, that means any characteristics of the page get transferred to the gold. It's not impossible to get a mirror shine with flat gilding, but it is rather... Oh, my flash just stopped. It's fine. It is rather difficult sometimes. Raised gilding used a painted on base, so to speak, so it didn't have to be thick. And in fact, most raised gilding is extremely difficult to identify as raised based on images alone. The difference is, though, that instead of using the parchment as a base, you create one that's smooth and allows you to polish the gold better. The surface of the gesso could actually be burnished. You can actually burnish this itself after you lay it. Even before putting the gold down, and it gives a greater shine to the gold because it's a smoother surface. Gesso usually had like a pinkish red color, pinkish to red color, depending on how much Armenian bull you added. This is the Armenian bull. Non-surefire, but pretty decent metric is that when gold is chipped off or flaked off and you can see the gesso underneath, pinker means more south like Italy and redder means more north like England. Again, not a hard and fast rule, but there's a lot of support that folks in England use a lot more of the bowl that gave it the red color than in southern Italy. There is a wide array of period gesso recipes, usually using lead white. But there is a non-toxic period approximate, one that's common in the SCA listed in the gilding handout page that's linked on the next video, and that uses extra Armenian bull to compensate for the lack of lead, plus slaked plaster, honey, and hide glue. So this is slaked plaster, Armenian bull, and then hide glue. So speaking of gilding, let's move on to that since we've basically already started talking about it. Okay, so in the last video, we started getting into flat versus raised gilding. So I've linked 2 examples in the comments of this post. Actually, no, I'm recording this before I write the post. I'm probably going to link more. But let's backtrack a bit. Period gold leaf was much heavier than our modern leaf. Like, this is double weight gold, which is still better than some of the modern stuff, but it's still nowhere near chinini weight. You can buy chinini weight gold, but it can be kind of expensive. You would put your gold leaf on a card with chinini weight gold and like prop up the gold on a card and carry it over and then have like a little bit hanging over, which you would use. So you could carry it over to the flat or gesso-sized area to rub it off of what you needed onto your mordant. Or you could put the gold leaf onto a gilder's pad, which is what this is. And then you like cut off the piece that you need. And there's a visual of that either in the handout or on the linked thing about doing gilding. And then you like pick it up with your pen knife or a fan brush. Fan brush is really good for that kind of thing. And then you carry it over to here. The mordant, both for flat and raised, is breathed on to hydrate it a little. It should be tacky, not wet. So like you can just like literally pick it up and go on it. But I also like these wide like milkshake straws. It allows you to kind of focus your breath. Let's see if I can do this at the same time. Oh, I also blew my gold up a little bit, but that should rehydrate it a bit. So the way I'm going to show y'all to do this is you can take like a little bit of like, let's see if you can see me, like oil like that off the side of your nose, right? And you like rub it on the glassine paper. And it acts as like this fake patent gold. It kind of like holds it on there. And picks it up like that. See? Ta-da! And then you just like carry it over and rub it on there. I already have one that's already started, so I'm going to use that. So I would just carry that over and rub it directly on there. But since I have one that's already been started, just lay it over it. I'm trying to do it one-handed, I apologize. There it is. You kind of see the little cutout now. See? These little hearts that are forming everywhere. And the great thing about doing it this way is that you can use it over and over and over and over again. So you actually don't end up wasting any of your gold. So that's a little trick for not wasting as much gold. So pretty much you layer it, burnish it, layer it, burnish it. You do it very carefully in multiple layers. Modernly, the process is often aided with the use of this glassine paper. So in between, like I'll rub it on with the glassine paper. I don't actually burnish in between or just like lay it on and directly rub it on, but that's a modern convenience. And then if you're doing it where you're cutting the piece and laying it on, you then like brush the excess away with a soft brush. So not that one. That one's really bristly. I have another one that's actually a cheap dollar store brush, and it ends up being super soft. And you store it away, and you put all your extra bits in here, and you can eventually powder this down to be used for shell gold. Then you burnish it once it's been long enough to stick, but not so long that it's not malleable. If you're doing the raised gilding, you still want it to be malleable. If it's flat, you just want it to be dry. So like technically the way to do it is to burnish directly on it, but I've literally never had any luck burnishing directly on there. So I always, when I burnish, I just keep going. Once I've already rubbed the gold off of that spot, I just keep going, and I use the glassine as a buffer for me to have a cleaner burnish. You can't get as much of a mirror shine that way as directly burnishing. But at least for me, it stays on that way. So, you also can use your burnisher for like, to shine the gold, to actually burnish the mordant if you're doing that. You can burnish that in between, and that way it's shinier. You can use it to smooth out a scraped surface on parchment. So it was super smooth in and of itself. The two most frequently cited, examples of burnishers are a polished stone, like this one, and a dog's tooth. Dog's teeth are difficult to come by these days, but you can get bags of coyote teeth to sort through and find a few that work, like a bag of like 100, and I think I found like 6 that worked. But they're super cheap. They're usually mounted on some sort of stick, like with the agate one. The burnisher on John Neal books that's shaped, there's a burnisher on John Neal books that's shaped like a tooth, but it's an agate burnisher, so you get both the polished stone smoothness and also the shape of the dog's tooth, which is really good for getting into like little crevices and stuff. And I have like other agate stones that I'll use every now and then, especially ones that you can find occasionally that have like little points or shapes that can help you get around in little areas, especially for the raised stuff. So I can't for the life of me burnish directly on it without messing it up, but I do encourage you to try it. It is an important skill to learn. I just haven't gotten to it yet. I'm thinking it might be because I don't wait long enough, or I wait too long. Either way, I just put a glassine between my burnisher and the gold. Not as shiny, but it works. Now as a note, since gold sticks to paint, flat and raised leaf gilding needs to be done before any paints are laid. I actually even do it before colored inks, depending on if the gold has a history of sticking to that ink. So if you have already painted and want to use real gold, you're pretty much stuck with shell gold or being crazy cautious with your leaf. If you'd like more information on gilding, there's a link to some more basic gilding info on the post for this video. Before I forget, the thing I forgot to do in the last video was when you're making your gesso, you can use like a pestle and mortar, but it takes forever, whereas the gesso takes minutes. I put it on a ceramic tile, and then I mold it that way. So this is my molar for gesso. This is the little agate I was saying with like that had the little point that was really good for getting into crevices. So you can find these at craft stores really easily. And then here's my cheapo little Dollar Tree brush that ended up being one of the softest ones to kind of paint or pull the excess gold off of the page. Alright, so pigments. This can be a very broad subject. It's really its own course, so I'm trying to give y'all a crash course in it. For a crash course in general pigments as well, as specifics on vermilion, lapis, lead white, terra vert, those can be found on the website, linked in the post. But pigments boil down to 3 things: pigment, binder, and water. Your binder can vary, but the most common are glair, which we discussed earlier, and gum arabic. Both were used in period. Glair tends to be an earlier binder and gum arabic a later binder because it allows for reconstitution easier and therefore the rise of Romanesque and later shading techniques. though that's not a hard and fast rule. So in your handout, it kind of has a visual demonstration of this, and also it's on the website. You add your 3 materials together. I use a glass tile to mull on. So you add your pigment. Oh yeah, I forgot I have all these. Hold on. Lead white. Okay, so you add your pigment, whichever one you're using. Then you add your gum arabic. I tend to add my powdered gum arabic in a 1-to-1 ratio. Liquid gum arabic is a thing. I just tend not to use it. I don't know why. I learned with the powdered, and that's what I do. And then you put a little drop of water on there, and then you take a molar. This is a really nice molar. I have like a teeny tiny one. I have this, which is actually a handle for like a cabinet that works. Like I've even used like the twist off bottle caps, flip them upside down, and push my fingers out to kind of like create the tension, and then mold with that. The powdered gum arabic tends to work in a 1-to-1 ratio with the pigment, and this can be done with a non-pore smooth tile. Like I said, I use glass. Molar period sources indicate ceramic glass, but any ceramic or glass, but any smooth and flat surface will work. So this further grinds the pigment and serves to mix it with the binder. And often I'll mix a large batch at a time and put it in these little sealable containers. So you can kind of see I have dry pigment in there that I can easily rehydrate. There's 2 actually discs that are stored in that one. Those are 2 of my umbers. But I found that that rehydrating can make vermilion get a little orangey each time I rehydrate, and the lead white gets harder and harder to rehydrate. So tread carefully with that. I tend to get my pigments from Natural Pigments. This is the brand I usually end up with. And they're usually pretty good about telling you how they make a ton of their colors, and at least about the chemical-based paints, like lead vermilion, as opposed to the mineral-based ones like lapis. Here's some lapis, and then here's some vermilion. I don't actually have that much. It just likes to powder on the walls. If you're doing A&S entry, make sure to research how your specific pigment would have been made, and how these are made, and how that might have made a difference. If it makes a difference at all. Sometimes it doesn't, but it couldn't hurt to research it. You can work with these period ones, but often you can also get these modern, like non-toxic versions if toxicity or cost is a problem. This is like a studio red and ultramarine. Here's a jade green. I have like a modern powdered terra vert with like chrome oxide in it to make it more opaque. So there's like a lot of routes you could go. The ochres actually tend to be actual ochres and not just ochre pigment. So look around, see what you're working with. But honestly, especially for arts and sciences, I suggest try with these cheaper powdered ones first. I think these were only like a few dollars. I got them at Gulf Wars a long time ago. And practice with them, see how they work, and then you can move on to these other ones. And you'll find that powdered pigments actually do, like, I wish I could paint with, like, powdered pigments for every scroll I did, which, honestly, I'm starting to get to that point, because you can control the opacity of it, and you don't have to do, like, 50 layers. So for brushes, real quick, I have made some before, but I really prefer to work with purchased ones. Period brushes aren't too different from modern natural brushes. They had, a wood handle. Let's see, where's one of my, this is my fan one, but whatever. They had like a wood handle. Other handles in period were made from a variety of woods like ash, oak, etc. So really any dowel can be used for this. And then you had the fiber, like a miniver, goat, horse, sable, whatever, and you'd like lay them out in a strip, and you'd tie them in the middle and kind of fold it over. I tie it in the middle with sinew. So you kind of fold it over, and it's all held into place with the ferrule, F-E-R-R-U-L-E, which is the metal bit on modern paintbrushes. So there's a lot of material that can make up the ferrule, but I personally like using the shaft of a feather from like a quill that I'm done using. I soak it, shove the folded up end of the fibers into the ferrule, and then shove the dowel in, and then I kind of let it dry, and it kind of constricts. Then sometimes it'll be loose, so I'll like wrap sinew around the ferrule as well if it dries too loose. But you'll want to look up videos for trimming paintbrushes though. It's not just trimmed like down from the outside. Like the longest bristles, like you'll kind of see this on modern ones as well. The longest bristles are almost entirely on the outside, and you kind of have to taper it from the inside out. So that can be difficult to do, but I suggest research that. Again, it's its own separate thing. So I think that's it for period materials. If you think I've missed something, or if you have something to add, anything like that, just let me know.